We have a question in the chat panel right now, how to mute your microphone.
All the mics are actually muted.
They're all muted. Yeah. All right. All right, so we'll start rolling right now. Welcome everybody to our first Inclusion Challenge webinar in this, our year-long series. Today we will be talking about B Corp supplier or client engagement and some self-organizing best practices. My name is Heather Paulsen and I'm really excited to be here today. I've been providing sustainability, strategy, and project management consulting services for about the last 3 years. And for the last couple of years, I've been really focusing on B Corp certification. And so I'm here with my collaborator, Anna McGrath from WonderWorks Consulting, and she will introduce herself in just a moment. But first, I want to give a peek at today's agenda. So first, I'll be introducing the webinar series and our context and talk a little bit about B Lab's Inclusion Challenge, of which this webinar series is a part. And we will be also going a little more in depth on how to engage your suppliers and clients. And Anna will be talking about conscious leadership. So I'll give this opportunity to Anna for her to introduce herself.
Great, thanks Heather. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be able to collaborate with Heather and speak to you all today. What our focus is, yes, we've got B certification and really the Inclusion Challenge, and we're bringing to that, bringing conscious leadership practices, how to truly evolve your culture in a way that aligns with your organizational values, but also with your organizational structure. So over the course of this, not today necessarily, but over the course of the entire webinar series, we'll be talking about self-organizing practices. But today, as you see, we'll really have a chance to dive more into specifically the skill of letting go of control. So I'll have lots more to say on that later, and I will pass it back over to you, Heather.
All right, thank you, Anna. So just a couple of housekeeping items here. All mics except for ours are automatically muted. You can post questions in the chat window, or you can raise hands so that you can share a comment, example, or a question, and to turn on your webcam so that we can see you speaking as well. And throughout the webinar, we will be doing a few polls, so you can share information back with us and we can make this as targeted to your interests as possible. I'd like to introduce Tanya, who is with WonderWorks Consulting, and she's providing our tech support and monitoring the raised hands and administering the poll questions as well. So if you do have a question and want to raise a hand, you will be promoted to status as panelist so that we can see you and hear you. And we'll be taking one question at a time as we have time for them to keep moving forward on our agenda. So the chat window is always available to you. All right, so to talk a little bit about our context and what we are coming to today's program with. We are in a time of rapid change and a lot of change. This is both kind of a disconcerting time and also an exciting time. And why I think it's really exciting is that we have this certified B Corp option now for businesses to use the power of business to solve social and environmental problems and really use business as a force for good. I think this is more necessary now than ever. And consumers also are more focused on not just buying good products, but buying good products from good companies. And B Corp certification, which was first made available in about 2007 by the nonprofit B Lab, they created a set of standards that provide third-party verification that companies are walking the talk, basically. B Corps meet higher standards for transparency, accountability, and measuring their impacts on all of their stakeholders, not just their shareholders. And there are currently about just over 1,900 certified B Corps worldwide, and everyone with one common goal, to use business as a force for good. So as we are moving into this sort of new economy, the focus on the triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit, the B Corp standards and certification tool is a really good framework for continued improvement and for doing a deep internal dive into how you are managing your business and your impacts on your workers, your community, and the environment. So that's one piece of our context. And another piece here is the context of transformation. And our model here on the right side of your screen shows that we have 4 areas of focus that are required for successful transformation. And those are self, organization, community, and planet. Anna will address this model in more detail today, and over the series, we'll be hitting on all of these areas. And what we're doing as businesses, we really do address all 4 zones, but in each webinar, each of us will be focusing on one of these areas. And today, my focus is on the organizational level, and Anna's is more on the level of self-reflection and development. So in the spirit of learning more about our context, we have our first poll, and we want to find out a little bit more about who is in our audience. So Tanya, if you could do our first poll, please. If you could take a moment to click the option that is most applicable to you. After most people have voted, we will share.
And actually, just as an FYI, if anyone's having any problem in using the poll, it could be that you don't have the latest version of Zoom. So if that's the case, just a heads up, you can take a moment to breathe with that. Or you can also update it, and then you'll be able to answer future polls. So depending on your personality, you choose.
All right. So we have the vast majority of our audience today is with a certified B Corp. Few are with companies not affiliated with a certified B Corp, but would like to be, and then a few that are in the none of the above category. So thank you for that. We will use that information as we move forward to target our content to you. So another big part of our context is B Lab's Inclusion Challenge. And like I said before, B Lab is the organization that manages the standards and B Corp certification. And this year, in an unprecedented maneuver, they have created this year-long inclusion challenge. And in this challenge, they have requested that all participating certified B Corps choose 3 metrics from the B Impact Assessment that will have a big impact on creating a more diverse and inclusive economy that works for everyone. So the challenge is to commit to improving your score and your impact in those 3 areas over the next 12 months. Our intent here with this webinar series is not to duplicate anything that B Lab is providing, but rather to complement it. And so I wanted to provide these resources for folks in case you didn't know about it. At bcorporation.net/inclusion, you can find links to the 2 webinars here that have already been done by B Lab. One is an overview of the Inclusion Challenge itself, going into some depth about what the metrics are that you can choose from. And then the second webinar was about how to enroll, how to get started in the Inclusion Challenge. So please go to those resources for enrolling in the Inclusion Challenge.
And just a quick note, we will post those links into the chat window at the end so that you'll be able to gather those. And we'll send you a copy of the PDF, the presentation, so you don't have to write notes about anything that's in the presentation.
Thank you. So when B-Lab issued this inclusion challenge in early October of this year, WonderWorks and I put our heads together to figure out what we could do to participate in the challenge and help it be more successful. So we decided that we could share our expertise around maximizing your B Corp score and building programs to succeed in the inclusion challenge. And specifically, we're looking at the measures around engaging your suppliers and or clients to engage in B Corp type behaviors and values to grow the B Corp movement through the existing network of suppliers and clients of certified B Corps. Because if more companies behave like B Corps, we will succeed in expanding our positive social and environmental impacts and also build a more inclusive economy more broadly. Our second goal with the webinar series is to provide professional development opportunities, which is another metric within the Inclusion Challenge. So you can invite your teams to participate in this series. And over the series of webinars, we will be providing the professional development education around self-management and conscious leadership so that you can grow these practices within your own organization. So a few words on why would you bother to engage your suppliers and or your clients. And the reason that we're focusing on both those audiences, suppliers and clients, is that for some certified B Corps, it makes a lot of sense to engage the supply chain in terms of making products and all the inputs that go into that. For other B Corps who are service providers, there's not so much impact potential on the supply chain side of it. And so in feedback with some of the people we've talked with in developing this series, they really had a request around how do we engage our clients in these conversations to grow the B Corp movement in that direction. So we're really focusing on both upstream and downstream impacts here. And so to engage your suppliers or clients, you will be able to learn more about the impact of your supply chain and earn points in your own B impact assessment. But you'll also be working to fulfill your company's mandate to grow the B Corp movement and to have the best impact in the world you can, not only in your internal operations, but also throughout your supply chain. You can help your suppliers and clients improve their impacts, and you can succeed in your inclusion challenge yourself by engaging them. So a note about control, because Anna will be talking about letting go of control. One thing that we do have control over is where we spend our limited resources as B Corps. And for many of us, now that we've done the deep dive and become certified B Corps, we know our internal impacts. Our next logical step is to really examine our supply chain and figure out what impact we're having in the choices we're making around our own suppliers and clients. At the same time we can control who's in our supply chain, we actually cannot control our suppliers or our clients. We can only invite them to participate. So to find out how many of you have engaged or tried to engage your suppliers or clients, we have another poll. And Tanya, if you could launch poll number 2, please. We'd really like to know if you've tried to engage your suppliers and clients, and for what purpose. So take a moment and you can select multiple options in this poll. All right, do we have results yet?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we have the most frequent answer is that we've explained we're a certified B Corp and what it means to us. And so what would the next step be from that? A few of you have encouraged your supply chain to take the quick impact assessment through B Lab or the full B impact assessment. That's fantastic. So we're going to talk, actually, before we do that, I have another question for you. What's been the result of those efforts of contacting your suppliers? So if we could have poll number 3. And if you don't see an option there that matches your experience, you can enter it into the chat window if you like. All right, do we have results here? Okay, so a few of you have had success with engaging your partner organizations. Some of you have identified suppliers or clients who may be open to the next step, and what the heck is that next step? And a few of you have said that it's hard to get them interested. And in the chat window, we have not yet engaged in these conversations. So we're going to talk about how we're going to move forward here. I want to talk about some of the common challenges that some of you may have run into, but that I've heard several times with the clients that I've worked with when we talk about supply chain engagement. Sometimes they say, we're too small to influence our suppliers or clients. We are just one buyer of thousands of their product. And so, you know, they're never going to listen to us. And in some cases that definitely may be true. And so maybe we need to look elsewhere for where we can expand our impact. In other cases though, we have been surprised about who has become engaged, even from a small player in that part of the supply chain. It's more about the ideas than about your size as a buyer from your suppliers, for example. We'll be talking about ways to engage them that may help get you over this hurdle. Another one is that we don't have time to engage in these conversations. We're too busy with our day-to-day operations, and you know, I don't know where I'd find the time to put this into my schedule. And so again, this is a very real concern. This is not uncommon at all, but we aim with this series to break it down into bite-sized pieces and streamline the process to help overcome that time challenge so that everybody's not having the same big learning curve, you know, reinvented all over the place. A third thing, which this is a great problem that I wish more people found that they had, I can't seem to engage all of my suppliers. At the annual B Corp conference last month, I heard one of the bigger B Corps in our community talk about, you know, I've only been able to engage 50% of our suppliers. I think that's a pretty good problem to have. And I think we need to not think of this as an all or nothing type of journey, that even if we can grow the B Corp movement by 1, that's still a really fantastic thing. So yeah, we're going to focus on bite-sized practical pieces, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And then another very real concern is that my suppliers and clients might feel threatened by these conversations. If I survey them about their environmental practices, for example, they might feel like it's an audit. They might feel like if they don't answer correctly, or like they think we might want to hear, that there might be some adverse consequences. So we're going to talk about throughout this series, building these conversations in ways that there's not that audit component or that threat to it. Although you as a B Corp may develop screening tools, for example, that would, if suppliers aren't interested in engaging in these conversations, and you have alternate suppliers that might be more inclined to follow these values, then maybe you have a choice about who your suppliers are. But for the most part, we just want to make sure that this is a productive conversation and not a threatening one. If there are any other challenges that people have come across that we haven't touched on yet, feel free to put them in the chat window. Anna, do you have any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would say the big one I find is people, they're interested, they're engaged, they see it's relevant, but it's just getting that kind of right champion, that internal sponsor for it is the biggest thing that I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've noticed that too, that oftentimes if you can get the leader's ear at the CEO level or at that leadership level, it's a much easier win than if you're starting somewhere else within the organization.
Yeah, and I'm thinking even some of the people on the call, they might be internal to organizations and not at that decision-making level. So it's a great kind of piece of knowledge to know it's available, because I think that the B certification is going to become more and more important going forward to really show that kind of third-party certification of what are you really doing, so it's measurable.
Yeah, well, thank you. So we're going to talk about tools that we have at our disposal to engage our suppliers or clients. The first one, and maybe the most obvious, is one-on-one conversation. And this is really where we're going to start focusing today in some detail. In addition, there are screening tools that you can use to engage your suppliers in these conversations or find out more about their social or environmental impacts. There are survey tools available as well, or you can develop custom surveys for your industry or your particular business. B-Lab has a treasure trove of resources, and we'll be touching on those when those are appropriate as well and available. And then finally, your own B Corp network is a huge resource, and I really encourage people to get involved in tapping into the genius that is within this community across the board. So those are some of the tools we'll be touching on over this series of webinars. And like I said, today we're going to start with the one-on-one conversation. And this is your first potential homework between now and the next webinar. And for those of you who are just beginning this journey, my advice would be to pick a receptive supplier and a very simple business concern. For those of you farther along, this may be an opportunity to pick either your most challenging supplier or your largest and try out the conversation. So really the series of tasks here is to first identify at least one supplier or client who seems receptive. Talk with your team. Find out who has talked with the various supply chain members in your organization. It's likely that someone has had a conversation about B Corp at some point and may have piqued somebody's interest. So once you identify one or more suppliers or clients who have expressed some curiosity about this, commit to engaging them in a conversation. And then with your team, the second task is to identify a real business concern, such as waste reduction. And I'm going to give an example of how this has worked beautifully for one of the clients that I've worked with. And then once you've identified your business concern, you invite that receptive supplier or client to partner with you to solve this business concern. And then the ripples can really grow from there. So the example that I'd like to share is about a brewery that I work with, where they're engaged in a zero waste certification project right now. And so they're aiming to divert at least 90% of their waste stream, hopefully a whole lot more, from the landfill. And so one day, a few weeks ago, the owner of the label supplier was on site to meet with them. And so they were walking around the plant, and this supplier provides all the labels on all their beer bottles and that kind of thing. And Mike, who's in charge of the zero waste project, said to this guy, every time we open a box of your labels, there's a layer of bubble wrap on top of all the labels. And all we do is throw that in the trash. We have no way to reuse it. We have no way to recycle it. It seems like such a waste. Is there any way that we can eliminate this? And he explained the context that, you know, we're interested in this because we're trying to get zero waste certification, and we're trying to get zero waste certification because we're a B Corp, which is really about these larger values. And the label supplier was from, I think, Ohio, and had never heard of B Corp, or I don't even think he was familiar with zero waste. But he got so excited about this potential that he went back to his plant, and they decided to eliminate that unnecessary bubble wrap, not only for my client, but across the board. So they are saving money and time and effort in, you know, no longer having to have that component of their packaging. And then on my client end, they're saving money and time and eliminating a real obvious source of waste. So that's an example, I think, of how you can start a simple conversation with a supplier who seems receptive. And then when they get excited, you can deepen that conversation bit by bit. Since the bubble wrap conversation with that supplier, he's now really curious about becoming a B Corp, and what does that mean? And could my company qualify? And what would we need to do? And so that's a conversation that is getting much deeper and much richer as time goes by. And I think it's a fabulous example of how to begin this engagement journey. And then with the fourth task here, I put as optional, invite them to join our next webinar, because they might also benefit from this series of conversations. And with that, I believe it is Anna's turn.
Beautiful. And I think what I'll do is I'll switch it over so I can, if you stop sharing, I'll go ahead and share my screen. So I want control of the presentation is basically what I'm saying there. So that's great. Really appreciate it. Heather, you know, you're talking about some specific tools there that you can really put into action. We're going to segue into looking at also some practices. And as I think about the different types of practices, we focus on, because basically to make any kind of shift, this is really what we're talking about, is you're shifting behaviors around bubble wrap, or you're shifting leadership behaviors. We're shifting behaviors within your community to really create an economy that works for all. That's, I think, the largest, not the largest, but one of the ways to frame the largest goal that this is about. So to do that, there's actually a whole transformation that needs to happen on the individual level before you can ripple it out to organizational, community, and planet. So today, I'm going to touch upon self-organizing systems in just like a couple of minutes. You will have an opportunity either later today or in the follow-up SurveyMonkey to select the particular subjects you want us to be presenting on. So self-organizing systems will be one subject. There will be many others that will be coming along. So I will, as I say, I will touch upon self-organizing systems before we really dive into the conscious leadership practices, or the one I've selected for today. And when I'm talking about self-organizing, I'm really talking about how does each person have decision-making authority? How does each person get to put forward their ideas, their challenges, and how do they have a level of participation in the organization that they can actually really translate what their issues are into meaningful change. I think that why this is really important is because the world is changing at such a fast pace that you can't purely have top-down decision making, where the leaders are the ones that are making decisions. When I use the term leaders, I'm talking more about every single one of us is a leader. I lead my life, Heather leads hers, we all individually are leaders. And how can you show up with that level of ability to engage at work? So any self-organizing system needs practices in place to make that happen. And I think one of the most critical elements are who makes decisions, because decisions, the act of making decisions is transformational. Meaning, if I don't make decisions, if I follow every instruction that Heather gives to me, I don't get to have that kind of that growth opportunity of making decisions that aren't very good sometimes, or making really brilliant ones and then, really celebrating those. So I really look at, does everyone have an opportunity to make decisions in their day-to-day work? And are we moving decisions as close to the work as possible? Which therefore, benefit-wise, you get faster, much more iterative decisions. And my experience is people are more engaged, people become more productive. Things like, like the productivity, the bubble wrap layer, the equivalent of that gets removed from the way we interact, from our packaging, from every single aspect of how we do our work. So self-organizing is an enormous subject, but I think that underneath it, what I want to talk about today is the actual mindset of when you are moving to a more distributed leadership model, or when you are moving into these very progressive mindsets of even becoming B certified, what are some of the actual mindset shifts that are needed? And the one that we're going to be looking at today is really this challenge of letting go of control. And it was earlier this year at the Champions Retreat, the annual B Corp retreat, that Jay was talking about. One of his focuses was distributing leadership and letting go of control. So I thought, oh, that'll be a great subject for us to kick off the webinar series with. So there's all sorts of letting go of control, and I've just put a few examples up here. Because when I think about sometimes what the work is, that might be really clearly controlled in some way, the work that needs to be done. The boxes need shipping. But how am I going to do that? How do I actually have some level of ability to determine my approach? Also, where the work's completed. We're both working virtually right now. I'm sure a number of people who are tuning into the webinar, you work virtually, or you have a variety of different ways to work. We work in client situations, in our office, telephone, Zoom, all the different technologies. But also the type of space, you have open plan offices, which are brilliant, but you also want quiet space. And am I the boss, if you have that kind of structure, am I controlling how that is? Or am I really letting go of that to allow people to do the work the way it makes sense? That doesn't mean there are no controls. We will touch upon that as well. But with the focus right now of letting go, I think that this issue of decision making, I'm kind of using these titles here, like hoggers. I think about people who hog decision making. They're always the first to go ahead and move forward in making decisions. And that's a great thing. I'm not actually denigrating somebody who's willing to step up and actually make a decision. But sometimes it gets to that point, I would call them hoggers. Then hesitators, and again, that's an arbitrary term I'm using. It could be that they want to avoid making a decision. It could be they don't think they have permission to make a decision, and that they're constantly looking for approval or, you know, yes, that's the right way to go. But what I really want to kind of underline with this particular slide is, where do you sit on this? How do you relate to decision making? So I'm going to get Tanya to pop the first poll, the number 5 poll question. If that's okay, great. And if I can get you to answer this, so what's your relationship to control as it relates to decision making? It is a I'm going to speak while you, hopefully that's not going to put you off, but it is a multi-answered poll question, because in my experience, it's sometimes people act differently at work and at home, or it could be situation specific, relationship specific. But sometimes you've got a much, you know, the area to focus on is obvious. And so if it is obvious, go ahead and just put that answer through. Excellent. So I'll let Tanya go ahead and post results there whenever she's ready, and I'll actually just move on and we'll have a look at those. Oh, I think it might be coming. Oh, there you go. All right, so we've got your growth is to let go of making or approving the majority, so that's 27%. We've got your growth is to make more individual decisions, 45%. And then your growth is to integrate relevant feedback more effectively. Okay, 64. Beautiful. So that really shows you it's a wide variety of answers there. You've got the whole spectrum. And my experience is, when I'm talking to a group about letting go of control, I want to really underline that one person's learning is the exact opposite of somebody else's. And that's why all development is personal. What really is your challenge, so that you can customize the practices for each of you individually. So I'm going to take that, but I'm going to move on into a little bit more of a broad definition of control. So we were looking just through the lens of decision making there, and we could do, you know, 5 other webinars on decision making. So that might be one of the subjects you want to come back to in much greater depth, whether it's integrating feedback, individual decision making, or letting go of the decisions altogether. But I've got another exercise I want to put out to you, so we can maybe get somebody who would be willing to, after the exercise, volunteer and share their webcam and actually share their thoughts on it. So this control exercise, at which I'll get you again, Tanya, to go ahead and publish, number 6, it's really more about, what can we control? So what would be the answer of, what is it that you actually can control? And you've got all of these options. You can select all of the answers that you think you have the ability to control. All right. So as you are answering that, again, it's a multi-option poll. So select your, and actually, can I? Yeah, I will go ahead and answer at the same time as you are. Okay. Okay, so we've got 100% on our actions, love it. We've got 43% on our feelings. We've got 21% on our direct reports. We've got 86% on our choices, 7% on our boss, and 14% on our spouse. All right, so that's, you know, it's all sorts of things. That's 3 webinars right there that we can dive into just those results. So is there anyone who would be willing to, and I'm going to actually stop sharing the presentation for the moment. it's caused that much excitement for me. And what I want to do is I want to actually look at, is there anyone who would be willing to put their hand up in the chat window, or you could type in the chat window, but put your hand up, because I'd like to discuss anyone that thinks that they can control their feelings, their direct reports, their boss, or their spouse. So anyone with any of those options. I do have a tendency, to wait so I can deal with awkward silences. So just as a warning to anyone that goes, no, we won't be speaking up. I think we've got enough participants that we'll have somebody that will go ahead. So I'm going to have that go in the background. Will be looking for somebody to actually go ahead and volunteer. So Tanya, are we seeing any responses there? Anyone that thinks specifically our feelings? I'd love the person that wants to say they can control their spouse or partner. That person.
Teach us how.
Yeah, exactly. But all right, let's see. Any hands? Any brave hands out there? Oh, I see a hand. I see a hand. So Tanya will go ahead and promote you to a panelist, so we'll be able to hear you. Rebecca, all right, let's go ahead and we'll get your microphone. If you unmute your microphone, Rebecca, and then we'll be able to hear you.
Here we go.
Okay, great. All right, and we've got a furry friend with us as well. So which one was yours? Was it feelings, your spouse?
Mine was feelings, and I'm not going to say I can control them 100% of the time, but that I can be aware of what my perceptions are, and then helps control some of my feelings. Maybe control is a strong word for that.
Yeah, that's great. No, I really appreciate it, because this is the heart of it all. I think that so often really looking at what can we truly control, because this is, I think, one of the toughest pieces is where do we place our attention, because where can we actually control? So what I'm hearing you speak to, Rebecca, is influence. Like you've got some level of influence. So when you think about, could you name the feeling? It could be anyone, but what feeling are you thinking of right now? Sad, angry, scared?
Say insecurity.
Okay, so insecurity. And so when you think about that, and again, we can do a whole other piece about feeling. So under insecurity is, I kind of take on, there's some level of fear under insecurity. Would that be an accurate descriptor for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what would be some of the things you do to control insecurity?
Step into the real moment and be fully there in the moment, and then realize that that fear is a projection.
Great. Yeah. And so when you like stepping into the real moment, and to me that what comes to my mind is all sorts of presencing practices. And for you, I think about breath. Maybe it's time to breathe a little more, get a bit excited about, these subjects, and get a bit fast in my pace. So breath can be a great presencing. Movement, I'm not allowed to bounce on my bouncy chair because that's distracting for everyone. But what about you, Rebecca? What do you do? What specific ways do you step into the moment?
Oh, I'm a big proponent of breathing and listening, because generally if I'm listening 100% to what someone's actually saying versus my interpretation getting in the way, then my interpretation becomes a lot more accurate.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And all of these presencing practices, and I like to either call them presencing practices or shift moves, because often it's when we find ourselves where we're feeling, where we're not feeling present, we're actually distracted, uncomfortable, insecure, whatever the different experiences, that then I go to my reliable set of what can I do in this context. So if I'm sitting in front of a camera on a webinar, I'm not going to go for a 5-minute walk around the block, but just taking a big belly breath. That can be And I hear you really speak to listening, like putting that more sensitive awareness on the other person. So Rebecca, can I just double check you weren't the person that thought they could control their spouse? I just want to
No. Oh, I would never say that. Not ever. No, and every time I try, then I realize I can't control my feelings. So that's why I stay away from that.
Beautiful. Well, I really appreciate you raising your hand, Rebecca. Thank you very much. And Tanya will, but are you complete so we don't actually put you as a participant and then you had something else to say?
No, I'm perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So what Rebecca's really talking to there is there are certain things that we can influence. We can influence our state of mind. We can't control it though. But we're often led to believe that we can control so much more than we really can. So what I want to do is underline that out of that entire list, the only things that you have total control of would be your act, and even that, you know, the word total was a little, you know, that was a little bit too much of a stretch. But the way you have reasonable control is of your actions and your choices. And so that's what we really want to focus on at this time, is those actions and choices. Now, I took an action to make sure I could see the timer because I realized I couldn't see the time and don't want to go over. But this is an exercise that I won't do it now, but I want to show it to all of you because this is a great homework exercise that I will, you know, we'll be sending the presentation so you'll have a chance to look at it. I find that if you're working with your team or somebody one-on-one that's having some control issues at work, that this can be a great way is looking at, you know, can I control what will happen in the future now that Trump is president? No, I can't, but I can control my attitude about the future. I can't control whether someone respects me, but I can control whether I deliver on my agreements. And so there's, you know, a few more, how someone feels about me, or the emotions I feel in the moment. So there might be something that I'm feeling in the moment, but I can control how I act on my emotions. And when you think about so many different things that you face day to day in the workplace, it is about having that ability to get really clear on what can I control. I particularly like the last, well, all of these ones, but the last one, you know, how well an employee in my group performs, I can't control that, but how I deliver my feedback, I can control. So really getting everyone on the same page about what can you control and what truly is a waste of time and energy. So when I talk about control, there's two different ways I look at it. There's a whole body of work about letting go of control. And in the scheme of the way I think the world is moving, at a much faster pace, industries are being turned upside down. If you were a taxi driver 3 years ago, you're a taxi driver today, you have seen your world change dramatically. If you were working as an executive at Kodak, you saw some pretty dramatic change there. So as the world evolves, it really is critical that we learn the skill of letting go of control and then getting way more focused on how can I actually make great choices and actions. But I don't want you to think that control is a negative. So one of the things I look at with any subject that we're talking about, I'll always be looking at what is the opposite positive. Because if you want to have healthy empowerment in your organization, then you actually will require healthy control. It would be like having good metrics that you actually focus on. It could be having good policies and procedures. So they are control mechanisms and they are healthy ways to control. So it's not possible, or it's not healthy, should I say, to throw away control altogether. So I also, as much as I want you to focus on being able to let go of control, I want you to also look at where do you want to step in and actually put in a control mechanism. Heather talked about one earlier when she was talking about how you may want to invite people to become B Corp certified. That's not a control, that's a really clear action so that you can get your supply chain to be more and more in alignment with your own core values. So I know that I want to make sure that we've got a chance to talk about some next steps, because on each of these webinars, we want to make sure that you've really got some clear action steps if you're interested, whether it be from a certification place or from leadership practices place. So I'll have a look, I'll share this one, Heather, and then I'll pop it back over to you. So the one exercise that we did first, the poll, that control exercise can be really simple and easy so that you can really underline, to leaders, you do not control your direct reports. They are serving at, they are actually working with you, they are partnering with you, they are equals of you, they are leaders in their own right, and that you don't control them. You can put control mechanisms in place and you can invite them and request them. You could demand things. I would keep the demand category very, very short, very few demands. I think demand is actually something I've dropped out, but require, like this is a requirement of employment. That's a healthy way to go. Below, I'll be sending this PowerPoint so you'll be able to see these reflection questions, because for you individually, when you notice your controller gets triggered, really looking at what am I looking to control? What am I afraid of? What shift move could I take? Breath, movement, speaking authentically, there's all sorts of shift moves. And then also, if I'm trying to control something, whose decision is it? So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to go out to you, Heather, and let you go ahead. I'll move on to the next slide there. So you can share about the tool that you shared earlier.
Yeah, and this will be my optional homework from my perspective, is to commit to and try out some engagement around a very real business concern of yours with at least one supplier or client who seems receptive to that.
Okay, great. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing for this moment. I will go ahead and paste into the chat window some links that I said that I would paste in earlier. And basically these links are to sorry about that, it's not pasting in. I'll go ahead and do that in a second. But I also wanted to invite any questions that you might want to ask. You can type them into the chat window, and you can also raise your hand. It could relate to anything Heather shared or I've shared. And I'll go ahead and open that up as I am putting in each one of these links.
And just a quick reminder too to people in the context of the B-Lab Inclusion Challenge, if you want to go ahead and sign up for the Inclusion Challenge with B-Lab, these are the links that Anna's putting in right now, bcorporation.net /inclusion. And they're hoping that everyone can choose 3 metrics by tomorrow, December 1st. To really launch that. And they'll be putting together communities of practice around similar metrics. And so if you decide to choose metrics around your supply chain engagement or professional development opportunities, especially, then I think this webinar series will continue to be relevant for you.
Excellent. And I think that what we'll do, you can still ask a question, but I'm going to go ahead and get our final poll question set up with you, Tanya, because as we've mentioned, this is our first webinar. We are looking, our next one is coming up in January. The link to register for that is also in the chat window. But we would love to go ahead and get your feedback about particular topics that you would like. The first poll is actually all about B certification topics. And the second poll is all about leadership, conscious leadership, culture, and self-organizing systems and practices. So if you go ahead, you can, and also if you've got a question related to any of these topics, meaning you don't know what something means or you'd like further explanation, either pop that in the chat window or you can raise your hand.
Well, what I'm seeing on number 2, Anna, that it's a single answer choice only. It's not allowing me to choose multiple answers for question number 2.
Okay, all right. Well, what we'll do is on that one, we will follow up with a Survey Monkey. It's actually just got the wrong setting on that. So we'll go ahead and get that. So we can get your feedback on that. You can tell us what your top answer is on the bottom one, if that's, and we'll choose that one for next time. I'm going to double check to see if there are any questions in the chat window. If not, I would like to take this moment to thank Heather, actually, just remember, who is our Building the Movement 2016 winner for the Champions Retreat. She won this award when she actually went to the retreat earlier this year. So it's a pleasure actually collaborating with you. Thank you all for participating in the polls and in the webinar. We look forward to, that's great. All right, there's all sorts of answers coming back there. And if you've got any thoughts or questions, you can reach out to either myself or Heather. Our email address will be in the PowerPoint that we send, the PDF, should I say, that we send to you. And I'll pass it over to you, Heather, to close out.
Just to repeat, a big thank you to everybody for being here today. And if you have anyone else that you'd like to invite to this series, please keep an eye out and feel free to share the link to the registration. Our next webinar, we're skipping December because of the holidays. Our next webinar is Tuesday, January 24th, same time, same bat channel. And we hope to see you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.